Hi Elizabeth, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Great.
I'm so happy that Minx got saved, as it were, because I loved the first season and I really enjoy the second season. And
Yeah,
so
me too.
for you though, coming in, what has been the most exciting part about being a part of this second season and kind of being the savior of the magazine as it was?
Exactly. Well, if you've seen season one, which I really recommend everybody do, you're just gonna fall in love with the show. I mean, it's unlike anything. It's LA in the 70s. You've got this pornographer meets this feminist, and like how they try to work together to create something that nobody's ever done before in the magazine that they create. And you know, coming in as somebody on a show as a new character, you're always like, oh, I don't know. And they all seem to work so well, and they're such a tight knit group of people, and they just like opened their arms and welcomed me in. And I think Constance is going to add um, a, a point of contention for everyone. And her desire to elevate the magazine to new heights is going to create um, different responses from different people. And it's really going to show how each character really responds to fame or money or, their life taking a turn.
Mhm.
And I love that she's sort of an antagonist that way.
Yeah, and Constance is also kind of like the sugar mama of the
Oh,
magazine, like because
absolutely.
she's the one that's like, "Oh, it's my money though," and I love
Exactly.
that energy, especially in I think it's the second episode with the party. I love all the little references, like Warren Beatty is there. We never see him, but we just know
Yeah,
Warren
you
Beatty is
just know
there.
he's there. Yeah.
But for you, what is kind of the fun of getting to play in that time period where like it's not full, it's sort of fully committed, like Carl Sager, I think, is
Right, right.
working at the magazine at some point.
Hmm, hmm.
But like it's all these little references as like offhanded things. Like, what is the fun of like that aspect of this, especially with like your background in Hollywood?
Well, LA is unique for that. And LA
Mhm.
is really unique for the 70s because I would say that the 70s was one of Hollywood's really big heydays. I mean, there's been many, the
Mhm.
30s, but I think the 70s, particularly when independent film exploded in the 70s, music exploded in the 70s, fashion, you had everything going on in Laurel Canyon, you had feminism, you had, it's just the perfect city to sort of represent that era.
Mhm.
And it's the one thing that I love about the show is I think it singularly has captured that moment in time in this city.
And I do too think that Constance represents the kind of powerful woman of the 70s where it's like she
Hmm.
chose the line between sort of being a feminist but also still upholding the patriarchy in her own way. And
Absolutely. And
for
she's
you,
sort of very representational of a certain
mhm,
kind of feminism, whereas Joyce is sort of moving forward, whereas Constance is kind of, this is how you do it. It looks
mhm.
like this. And Joyce is saying, well, it could also look like this. And so there's a little bit of back and forth there in terms of how do we define feminism as it evolves.
Yeah, and so but for you though, like getting into that mindset of like how things kind of worked back then with especially feminism and women in
Right.
power, what was it like something you learned about kind of like that era and like the women like Constance that was surprising to you when you were preparing for this?
Well, I grew up in that era.
Hmm.
I was born in 1960. So the 70s were my teenage years. And that's where I myself developed all of my ideologies. My
Hmm.
sister was a radical feminist who was the editor of the school newspaper at the University of Vermont, which is like the most socialist school you can go to practically. And I learned a lot. And so this is very close to my heart in
Hmm.
terms of what does it look like to be a young woman trying to make it in a man's world. And
Hmm.
I've lived through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now I'm the same age as Constance. But if I had set myself back in the 70s and was at my age in the 70s, I would have a completely different perspective on
Hmm.
feminism is and was at that time. But if I was Joyce's age, I would have that ability to evolve, which I think has been so important for feminism.
Yeah. I can't wait for everyone to get to see season 2. I'm so excited that it's back. And I can't wait for them to
Me
get to meet
too.
Constance.
Yay.
Thank you so much for talking with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.